this is my house. We'll start off with mine. I just took this picture, I think, 2 days ago. This is uh, looking at the front of my house. Then this is uh, clammy weed, red skeleton clammy weed that actually is a volunteer. I got a plant from Bill Freehite. I forgot what it was. Plant, whatever I got from him didn't live, but these were in the pot. And they were very successful in growing and then reseeding and then growing and reseeding again. Very interesting little plant to grow. You don't want to grab it because it's very clammy, like the name says. It has a real funny substance to its hands, but it does bloom and the pollinators do really like it. So I'll try to collect some seed off of it and bring it if anybody wants it. Let's go to the next slide here. Let's see what we have. I tried to do this starting from last year, last October, since we did this show in September. We missed the October pictures, so come the end of September, the fall asters and Esperanza just put on a show. Last year we had rain, I think, in August, and it helped everything grow. This year was just the opposite, and these plants aren't near this big this year. They've stayed fairly small. Well, the fall aster I cut back because they get pretty big. So I cut them back. And after I cut them back, then it turned hot and we didn't get rain, so they didn't grow much. So my bad. Um, the Esperanza is not quite as full as it, or it just has one stalk sticking up this year for whatever reason. I don't really expect that plant to survive the winters, but so far it's come back for 5 years. So it's done much better than I thought. There is a little bit of goldenrod back there too, which is another fall blooming plant that we have. And again, as we talked before, it's a great pollinator plant, but not a really good plant for your landscape unless you have some way to contain it because it will spread. Let's go to the next.
Which one, Rod? Spread?
It's if you see the small yellow flowers in between, I'll point. These plants right up in here, it's the goldenrod. And that's after cutting them back probably 3 or 4 times. They will spread, so, and they will take over a spot if you're not careful. If you do want them in your landscape, I would keep them contained in a barrel or something and sink it in the ground and let them grow in there. They will reseed some too, so you may still have some pull up, but if you don't, each plant will send out 8 rhizomes, and those will send out 8 more. And next thing you know, you have a forest. Pretty much. I mean, there are some reseeding too, but the rhizomes, you start pulling stalks up, you just find the rhizomes going everywhere. So and it forms a pretty thick, I mean, once you get a full bed of them, nothing else grows in there, it seems like. So next slide.
Well,
right, if you have competition, then sometimes it won't, but so that was in the fall. So now we go through the winter into spring, and these are our first blooming plants, the red bud, of course. The Missouri violets, I did not plant those. Those came in on their own, and they have spread throughout the yard. They start blooming like last week of February. And pretty much if it stays wet this year, they were still green up until, I still got a few of them that are still green now, protected areas, but they usually kind of die out in the heat of the summer, and then fall, you start seeing these little leaves coming out, and they kind of sit there all winter and then bloom in February. Next. On the left, you have a Texas Buckeye, which I got at the herd plant sale. Didn't think the plant would do very well, but it's grown. When I planted it, it was only probably about 2.5 feet tall. Now it's about 9, 10 feet tall. So it flowers. It does lose its leaves. This year it lost them by the end of, probably mid July, I guess. The sun, it just doesn't, because it's not protected. It gets the hot sun. The leaves shrivel up and fall off of it, but it's come back each year. The rusty black haw arboretum, same thing happened to that. Mine, all the leaves are gone on it, except I have all these purple berries all over. But those also are early blooming plants. They bloom first week of March or so. So next.
Rodney,
Yes.
That's called rusty black.
Black haw, black haw.
JW.
Yes, verbenum.
Verbena?
Yes.
Viburnum.
Viburnum, I'm sorry. Something like that. So another early blooming plant is the golden groundsel. Another plant that grows in the woodlands, except I find they start spreading out into the sunny areas, and they seem to do well there too. As you can see, between probably Valentine's Day and March 1st, I cut everything back, basically down to the ground, except for the stuff that's blooming. And you can kind of see how the backyard looks from the flagstone patio. Next slide. Here's just looks like that was, yeah, that's Engelmann daisy. I'm sorry. Another plant that grew. I had planted one and got 10,000 seeds, and now I have a whole bunch of plants. They come up in the yard and everywhere else. Plant on the right is Texas dandelion, which also grows in the bar ditches and the median in the road leading up to our community. I did not plant that. Just come up, volunteer, pop up in places. So. They kind of die back, and usually now I've seen some leaves come up in the base of them. So some of them, they usually last, each individual plant probably lasts about 2 growing seasons, and then it kind of dies out, but it reseeds so much. We dug probably 100 of these plants out of my yard, donated them to various places, and they were still coming up everywhere. And I still got a few blooming here and there too, so, but nothing like what it shows in the springtime. And this is probably mid-April, I think, is when I took this picture, maybe 1st of April. It was quite colorful in the front yard with yellow. Next. Four-nerve daisy and the wine cup. The wine cup is growing up in the middle of my flagstone pathway, which I wasn't real happy about that, but it's not like I could dig it out either. So I just leave it there. And so it's like, forget it. The four-nerve daisy is a wonderful little plant if you have a dry area that gets plenty of sun. I've had some of these plants bloom 18 straight months, even with snow covering them, one yellow flower sticking up through the snow. Really hardy little plant, put it in the right place. Yes. Four-nerve. Yes. Sure. Sorry. Next. This little white flower, I have no clue what the name of this is because I lost the tag on it. If anybody knows, it's something I bought here at the Herd plant sale, but it's like I just don't know what it is. But it didn't look right, but
They look like Barbara's buttons, but giant ones.
Looks like what?
Barbara's buttons.
Is it? The leaves just didn't look right, but
I don't know about that. The flower does.
yeah, I know the flower looks like it. The leaves, though, there's that strappy little plant down at the bottom, and all of a sudden it sends these stems up. I just didn't recognize the plant, so, but
Carol says in the chat. Carol says in the chat it's Barbara's buttons, so I think she's probably right.
Okay,
The leaves are correct.
Okay, looks different than what I saw in the wild, but yes, Carol says it's that, and it's what it is. And And this is a picture of the front bed. You know, I have to keep that a little bit more tamed because of our HOA. So it's a little bit more tamed, even though the Engelmann daisies are growing wild all over the place. You can see all the little plants coming up all over the place. Next slide. Just more pictures of the Engelmann daisy and the mini blue sage that was blooming. A lot of butterflies this spring, red admirals. So next slide. Blue-eyed grass coming up. That was one of the prairie verbinums. Close-up butterfly. Next slide. Here's just another picture of the, you can see how this works in the landscape. Along the sidewalk leading up to the house, that's a scutellaria, the little purple ones. Fairly well behaved plant. I really, if you need something that's controlled in the side and, you know, edging type plant, I highly recommend that plant. Pardon me?
Right now.
I think so, yeah. I believe it is. And then you can see the other plants that are kind of mixed in there. Next slide. Just another picture of them. Yeah.
What's that one? That's the purple one on the right?
Yes, that's the scutellaria. It's skull cap. Skull cap.
It's
Yeah.
just wanted at the herd 3.5 years ago. It is huge, and I just hate trimming it back. Like
I cut that one back about half, and then it just exploded
it
out.
just
And
explodes.
same thing with the salvia greggii there. I cut that back by probably half, and then it just exploded out this spring. So, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and
so-
what do in the winter? Do you cut it all the way back? And
I start pruning all these plants probably, like I said, between Valentine's Day and March 1st. I try to trim everything up at that point in time, unless it's something that's blooming. So, yeah, I wouldn't cut it by more than half. Yeah.
and it comes bursting back.
Yes, in fact, I actually did it this summer. I cut it back half.
I mean, it's so gigantic. I mean, it's going half the walkway.
It is a trouble.
But you can, but with the, I think with the gray guy, for example, you can just go in and select cut branches back, you don't but branches that don't
Bulk afterwards is one big thing. You can't just selectively do it. You just have to kind of.
Well, that's why I cut it at that time of year and just trim it back. You know, I still try to keep the roundness of it and everything, but I cut it back by about a third, maybe a little bit more than that. So as we move on here with the slides, these are just advancing into the springtime a little bit more. You can see the variations in the texture of the plants. There's Illinois bundle flower coming up in there. And of course, the red yucca is blooming. So next slide. And then if you remember that one picture where I showed you where I trimmed everything back, this is what it looks like in May, how everything starts growing. And now you can't even walk down that path because it's so overgrown because I haven't trimmed anything the last 2 months. And of course, we have a little gray hair streak here on rattlesnake master. So next slide. These are just pollinators, you know, wasp. you don't think of them as pollinators, but they love to get onto the flowers, and they're probably one of the more active pollinators we have. Next slide.
What kind of flower?
That I think that's what it is. Again, it's another one that I lost the tag to, so it just mint. Cone flowers, again, you can see various pollinators on it. Next slide. Here's the rattlesnake master. This is probably getting into June. I had planted one rattlesnake master and got probably 300 now coming up. I'm digging those out too. So, yeah,
Yeah.
well, I supplied plants last year for it, so yeah. Texas senna there blooming after a rain in June, I believe. Next slide. Just some pollinators, and then one sunflower that I really enjoy. I have a whole lot of sunflowers in the backyard of the annual sunflowers that overtake the whole yard, but this one is a stiff sunflower, and this got probably a little over 10 feet tall. It was huge. Did quite well. So I think that's the last slide. So,
Yes.
so it's
So, will sunflowers, so they do solid, become prolific, can they, are they hard to control?
coming up, except for one or two.
What?
Probably not hard to control.
Well, it's one of those things where you miss a few, then you won't find a huge plant, because one sunflower plant is, just goes everywhere. I leave them because the birds love them in the wintertime, though.
Oh,
So we're going to move on here next to Denise and Pat. So a combination. But I just want to the people here, I wanted to make a couple things that Carol had mentioned. It was narrow leaf mountain mint. So, and then we talked about, and then the other one that Carol mentioned that I think is appropriate. We talked a lot about the goldenrod. She mentioned that the stiff goldenrod is less aggressive than that version. And then two other announcements she had. She's seeking cowpen daisy seeds for the chapter fundraiser, and also clammy weed seeds. So,
It's not collected.
okay. So, yeah, I'll get back to you to connect you with Carol then, Tina. All right. Okay. So yeah, Denise is up.
Okay, hi, I'm Denise. This is my mom, Pat. We're kind of a little gardener combo here, but we're new to the chapter, and so we thought this would be great to help introduce ourselves to you all a little bit more. But we are constantly rescuing plants and acquiring new plants, and we're kind of addicted to having one of every native that we can find in the area and putting it at the farm as like a little safe haven, a little sanctuary for these natives. Here we are in this one photo digging up some plants where there used to be the burger fixins in Salina. We got hooked up with the new property owner, and we're always doing shenanigans like that in the spring and summer. But just shared a couple unique plants up there. I love there's kind of a cool mutation there. And Carol, it sounds like you're the guru. So if any of these names are wrong, please just correct me in the comments. I tried my best with the scientific, but that red purple bee balm is one of my favorites that we found at the farm. It's funny, my dad saw it blooming one day and it started out just kind of this brown flower, and he was like, "This is the ugliest flower I've ever seen." And then it turned into this like, beautiful swan of a flower, and it's like in this one little spot in this rocky area of the farm, and we just love it. So that's one of probably my favorites. I've never seen that before. And then just the classic bee balm. Yeah. So I didn't know kind of what to do for the slideshow, so I just took like up close pictures, but these are all at the farm. Mom and dad have some land at the farm that they've allowed me to kind of preserve and just be this wild, mini nature preserve for us. So the fringe cocoon came with the property. We just adore it. Tiny little surprise for the spring there. And then blue curls is one we've added in. It wasn't native there, but we've added him into some areas to get him going. The ironweed was native. We just absolutely love that in the fall. Always super showy to look forward to. Saving and sewing. So I just wanted to include this. We try all different types of methods. Probably our biggest challenge, wouldn't you agree, is with wildflowers is how difficult they can be to get started. So here we are doing the seed blocking, and I've taken over my mom's kitchen basically. People probably think we're doing something shady in there with all the grow lights. I mean, it lights up the outdoors at night. But she's supportive of all this. Yeah. Yes, yes. And so I'm like between, her multi-tier shelf with all the lights, we do a lot of growing. Here we are trying cornmeal to help with the algae. If anybody's got tips for algae when you're seed starting stuff, but we also dig up a lot of stuff. There's a guy in Gunner that lets us dig some of his liatris up. So we just fill my car up to the max. Sometimes my car is so full, she has like plants in her lap. We'll dig it until we have no more room. So I've just added a few there, kind of in that native landscape in my little driveway I've started over there. I don't know. I know. These are just some more things that we've either found at the farm or we've added. The Carolina woolly white is one of my favorites, probably just because it's fun to say, to be honest, but you don't see that a whole lot around Gunner where the farm is. So I dug that up from Sherman, actually, in this like utility area. I rescued it. It's always a rescue. And so the same for the purple coneflower. We were so excited that those started coming back for us. But the black-eyed Susans, the Mexican hats, the sundrops, those are all native on the property. So we've just kind of helped preserve those areas. So we have a really cute little display garden at our tree farm that we just love. And it's interesting how many photographers it draws to it. But we got this old, rusty truck on Facebook Marketplace, and we're going to put flowers in the back truck of it too. We've built out that, but we've got just wildflowers all around it. We either get seeds, or I know Rodney even gave me some seeds at the expo we've added in there, but we just love it. And it's just so showy, and it's multiple seasons of color, and it's a good controlled area. There's a few things we have that are out of control in the controlled area, so I guess that's okay, but just kind of a little showpiece. And customers at our farm, we have a tree nursery, they just love, and they just are always over here taking pictures and whatnot. So it's kind of fun to get people excited about wildflowers to show how nice it looks. Favorite finds and floral faux. So the prairie larkspur, this is actually from our neighbor's property. He mows this every year. We always forget to go dig it up. We drive by it and we're like, oh, it's blooming. And by the time we go back, he's mowed it over, which is just crazy to me. But this next year, we're determined to beat him to it. Yeah, it's just beautiful. He has so many. I've just never seen them in the area naturally, but that one is one of our favorite finds. The death camas, I actually saw, I know I found some. I saw Ted Eubanks on Facebook, the wildflower photographer. He had just posted a picture of it, and I was like, Mom, I think I just saw that the other day. Sure enough, her and my dad and us like load up and go over in Gunner to get some. We dig it up and we have it in buckets in the back seat with my dad. And we're sitting there like also Googling kind of more about it. And it's like toxic to even pollinators. I mean, it just anything that touches it except for this one rare bee basically dies. And so my dad we're on the road and he starts rolling the window down and we're like, are you okay back there? And he's like, I'm back here with the death camas, So we we have a good time together, driving everybody crazy. But I loved it. I was so excited. I found one of Ted Eubank's, rare plants. And then the field of prairie penstemon, this we found in Howe. It's off like 902. It's like this endless acres of like prairie penstemon. It's just insanely beautiful. So we go up to, it's on like this county property. So we're like anything from the easement, we're just like, we'll collect some seeds. So I've got a few started. I was so excited that a few actually started blooming this year in our truck bed. But this photo does not do it justice. It's like insanely beautiful, just acres of prairie penstemon that have been there for no telling how long. So kind of a magical little site there. But yeah, some of my favorites there. And then the two pictures on the left are actually at our farm. This is the property mom and dad let me just play around on, and they help plant wildflowers with me, and they've no telling how much they've spent on seeds. Don't add it up. Just keep supporting. Yeah. But the bottom is spring, so it's like primrose and, paintbrush and blue bonnets and coreopsis. And the top, you can see all different types of Mexican hats and bee balms there and lots of good stuff. And the photo on the right is just one that I thought was so striking in Sherman. It's a little blurry looking here, but it's just acres and acres of yellow indigo that I found in Sherman. I'm just always, photographing things that look so stunning. I can't believe they're real, but oh, Sherman, dude, all over Sherman. I don't know what it is. They're like the yellow indigo capital over there. In Tioga, there's quite a bit of it. Purple indigo, just fields of it. But yeah, I just prefer native. I'm like, you can't beat that. You can't do a flower bed design that tops that. That's just, we actually have a little, well, it's loose. You can just dig it and it just falls through your hand. It's like this beautiful
I
little,
think that doesn't, it doesn't grow well in the true blackland prairie.
the indigo.
Yes.
Yes,
I think
yeah.
it's sandy, loose soil. Do well.
Yeah, that makes sense since we find a lot in Tioga, a little more sand that way. Yeah. But anyway, that's our presentation. I know we love it.
Pictures on,
Oh gosh, definitely probably mid-spring or maybe early to mid-spring on that bottom one. And this top one, gosh, was that into June? It seemed like the Mexican hats were a little earlier this year, at least at our property. Would you say that was June? Yeah, I'd say June. June for the top.
it sounds like a field trip.
I would love for y'all to come to the field trip. The farm's in Gunner, and is it 10 acres kind of our little, we call it our nature preserve. I know, 10-acre nature preserve, and we got lots of stuff over that we plant. It's beautiful. So yeah, field trip.
That was the time.
I know. Spring or summer. Please do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Not formally, but I think of myself as one because there's tons of milkweeds in this field too. We have just endless. I don't know anybody that has more milkweeds than us. So if anybody needs, I don't think they transplant very well. Maybe I think seeds are best. So we have two types, but it's going to be, I believe it's the antelope. I know I need to double check it, but we have two types, but the one that's really prolific is the antelope. So a seed collection / tour is fine too. Yeah. Yes. Sounds good. Please do. I sure can.
All right. Well, thank you, Denise. That was great. Very good. So, Marianne. Yeah. So the the virtual people can hear you. We have a stand in here. I think we got the better end of the bargain here with.
I wouldn't count on that.
Or something.
So we moved a little over 2 years ago. We moved to,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
we moved to Heritage Ranch a little over 2 years ago, which is in Fairview. And the house we purchased, about 17 years old. Previous single owners for that entire time, the previous owners were avid gardeners, but like all of us hoped to, got old and just weren't able to keep it up. So when we got there, we were drawn to this property because it had a bigger yard. And but we had to kind of clean it up. And of course, it wasn't what we wanted because we love the natives. Heritage Ranch is got a very heavy-handed HOA. They even tell you what you can have in your backyard because it's on a golf course, and so many of the properties are essentially public facing. So, and you're not allowed any like wooden fencing. It's all like iron fencing, so everybody can see into the yards. We don't happen to be, our backyard's not very public. It faces a green belt. This is actually a picture of our backyard. When we first got there, as I said, it was just crazy. Lots of, pine trees growing up where the squirrels had planted them, lots of crepe myrtles that had been crepe murdered, and lots of like iris just in weird spots. But there were a few things that were nice. We had black-eyed Susans. We had a ginormous Turk's cap, which we love. Some butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. So there were a few things that we saved. Go ahead to the next slide. I'll try to do this pretty quickly. This presentation really just focuses on the front yard. And this is what it looked like before. The front yard on the right side is fairly shaded by some huge pecan trees. In fact, they're not quite as shaded now because the trees were coming over onto our roof. And Tony called the HOA, and that's just like a little teeny park right next to our house. Called them and said, hey, the trees are like laying on our roof. And they came out and they looked at this pecan tree, and the branches had gotten really, really long on this tree. And they said, we got to get the arborist out there. We think that if we get a good wind, this whole thing could just, huge branches would break off. So they came out and they did some trimming back. So we get a little bit more sun on the left side. The right side gets that really strong afternoon sun. So the previous owner had tried to grow a Japanese maple there. You can imagine how good that tree looked in the middle of the summer. And they also had a Yopon holly that they had carefully trimmed into a lollipop and planted a bunch of little hollies below it. It was special. Anyhow, go ahead to the next one. So what I wanted to do, and Tony agreed, was I wanted it to be, I wanted to plant things that for the most part were native. We have a few non-natives in there, that didn't overgrow their space. It's a tiny, tiny bed. And so I didn't want anything that was we're just constantly gonna have to be hacking back to try and make it fit. And I wanted to have a little more southwesty type things with like yuccas and agave and stuff like that. So that's what we went with. And you can see quite a bit of yucca. There's one agave in there. We have a Oklahoma red bud, but let's go on to the next slide. Let's see, what have we got here? Oh, we've got some coneflowers on the left. They don't look so great. That's purpura. Then on the right is Xmenia. And I'm really happy with that plant. One of our neighbors down the street had it, and I kept walking by going, that's Xmenia. And I finally waylaid the owner, and he told me it was. And so I think that's going to work. That's working out pretty well. Next. You can go to the next slide. Okay, Pavonia. I'd only tried to grow Pavonia before in a place that didn't get that much sun, and I wasn't really impressed. So at our previous home, we had a front flower bed that got a lot of shade. And Tony went to the herd sale and picked up everything that said that could grow in shade and brought it back and replanted it. But I don't recommend a lot of shade for that plant. It never did much. But right now it's looking really fabulous. You know, during the mid part of the day, those pink flowers are just so bright. And they're right next to, we'll see in a minute, right next to a bed of Blackfoot daisies. So next slide. We created a new flagstone walkway and had this little tiny spot where we could plant. So we have pale leaf yucca, the Polita, I think it's called, and four-nerve daisy and Blackfoot daisy in that little spot. We're a bit concerned about mulch floating away, so we just ended up getting that Texas bull rock, which is really quite a pretty stone. It's about this big, and so that's what we have in that tiny little bed and in some of the other areas as well. On the left, you can't really see any blooms on it, or I guess maybe you could if you got up really close, but that's the flame acanthus. Yeah, we tried planting some of the Salvia coccinea there the year before, and every day it looked like it was dead. It was so wilty because the sun is so hot and it's against a brick wall that says we're getting the heat from both directions. So I had read that flame acanthus actually is highly recommended for against a really hot full sun wall. It's hanging in there pretty good. Okay, next one. So you can see the flame acanthus, and in front of it is kind of a big swath of the Blackfoot daisy. There's yellow. I don't know why these pictures have yellow in it. Tony managed to do something very special with his photography because there's nothing yellow there in real life. Yeah, it's very weird. Yeah, it's something very weird. So we've got in the left picture, there is an agave. It's the Neo-Mexicana. I wanted an agave, and I wanted something that was not going to die when we get these unexpected cold snaps down to like 0 or close to 0. And the two that I found, there are a lot of them that are good down to 15 degrees. They'll say, oh, great, these are really cold hardy, good to 15. And I'm going, yeah, but we get these other freezes in the winter every so often. So the Havarti, or Havartiana, and the Neo-Mexicana are the two that can go all the way down to really cold. And so we have that. We have some more of the pale leaf yucca. We have a pink skullcap, which was not doing well in the backyard, and I thought it was because it wasn't getting enough sun, but apparently I think it's just a bad plant because we moved it up front and it hasn't bloomed once this whole summer. We have some big patches of a plant that is called creeping germander, not native. Has little purple blooms, but it's really pretty. Go to the next slide. Okay, so on the right is a patch of the Salvia coccinea. Doesn't look like there's any blooms on it right now. Go on. Okay. And this is along the side of our house. It's pretty deep shade most of the time. And we just planted a whole row of inland sea oats. And they're doing really well. If you can find anybody that has too many, and they do seed out well, they transplant amazingly well. And then on the right, the photo on the right is Oklahoma red bud. And at its base on the right-hand side is the Scutellaria meritii, the purple skull cap. And mine isn't so big that I have to worry about trimming it back. But it gets quite a fair amount of shade. So it's done actually better than I expected with as much shade as it gets. Is that it? Yeah. This is California. I don't know why Tony put California here, but it's really pretty, isn't it? Exactly. Yes. Yes. I mean, what's not to love about that? I think it's Point Lobos. Yeah. Yeah. My favorite place on the West Coast. Okay.
All right, thank you. So Nancy is next. And Nancy has both a presentation and a true old-fashioned show and tell, right?
Haven't done this before, so I'll just. Yes, good evening. It's nice to be here and see all these beautiful slides and plants that all of us just love. I had the opportunity this morning to make a trifold for a Plano Garden Club. I wanted to expose as many people as possible to native plants. And I thought, why not make it on Gardening for Biodiversity? So I asked if I could bring it along, and then I remembered that we're online and so forth. And so I was asked to do some slides pertaining to the trifold. So it's a very basic program, but still I think some of the slides are colorful and they're from a couple of gardens. So you can do the next slide. This is our Monarch Way station at the Manasseri School, Archgate Manasseri on Legacy Drive in Plano. It's been in there a year, and this picture was taken just a couple of months ago. So it's doing very well. Our recent hot weather and not having terrific irrigation has caused it to look a little on the fall side more than I'd like. But we're working on it, and it's where I have taken some of the pictures for the presentation. Next slide.
Helps if I share the slide with everybody.
Yeah.
One second.
That's okay. That's okay. And so what I did is in this trifold is go through some native plants throughout the year. And so this is the springtime natives that we have at school in different gardens and in the Monarch Way station. But truly lovely and attracting. I'm an insect person. I love to take pictures of insects. So I'm out every day in my alley garden and my gardens at school taking pictures of visitors and learning about them. At our age, I think it's important to keep learning. So this is what I focus on. Okay, and the next slide.
Question?
Yes. There's bee balm there. That's another Monarda. It's I don't have my paper with me. Okay, lemon bee balm was the first one, and Monarda. Got my papers back here. Can I walk that? No, I can't walk that far. Just a moment, and I'll give you an answer. Right here, we have two milkweeds that we have. I have to tell you that the one on the left, the green milkweed that you see there, I just took a picture 2 days ago and I added it to the program. This milkweed grows beside my driveway. I never planted it. And it's outstanding for me because I live in Plano. We have ordinary, regular, little small gardens. I try very much to have mainly native plants. This has somehow seeded itself there, and I am so happy and pleased to see it. The other is tuberosa, Asclepias tuberosa, and this is in my alley garden. I decided quite a few years ago that I was going to have an alley garden, and I asked the city for permission to do this. They said great, and reading online and my beginning horticulture studies, I was told that I read that it was advisable to put a border around something to make it look special or unique or what can I say, neat. And in a city situation, I wanted to make sure I followed all the guidelines. So actually, this was a raised bed with a wooden raise to it, sideboards. It was reported to the city last year after being there for 10 years, you know. So it had to come out. So I said, I'm not going to stop the alley garden just because of this. And so I have rocks periodically put throughout the garden. And nobody's said anything so far this year. And I just went out this week and I trimmed everything so that it was off the alley totally. And that there's some big plants out there, but my milkweed goes meandering throughout the length of the alley garden. Next slide. There's more of the alley garden in the springtime, and that's my crossvine. And I love it. At this time of year, it's still blooming. A few blooms are around, and I do see some hummingbirds. But there's lovely, and garden spiders I have out here. This was taken in the springtime, and my plants are quite large now, quite high. So I have, I love to go out there and see the different bees. The lance leaf coreopsis is in my backyard, and it just took off and took over, as you can see, and that was just fun to have. Next slide. And here we have the coneflower, which is great for summertime. Can you tell me? There's a non-native there, and it's the Salvia garanticia. I probably said that wrong. It's from South America. But I had to include that picture because of this great bee who is stealing nectar from the opposite end of the flower. Instead of going down into it, he's at the neck of the flower and drilling in and getting his little nectar fix and leaving. But I don't know whether they drill or just, you know, poke their sharp little. I imagine, yeah, hard to imagine, but I was happy to get that picture. And salvia, but these are all good. And I think the bottom picture of the salvia, you'll see a little bee block in there. That's from the school garden. Okay, next slide. And of course, the black-eyed Susans and brown-eyed Susans. The farthest one here on this side, what is this, the left? Yeah, okay, is triloba. It's a little bit different than the Herta or the Fulgida, black-eyed Susan, but they both do very well. And I find that the triloba will kind of spread around my yard. It travels a bit. And this is my side yard, very narrow side yard as we have in Plano. Next slide. And then of course, this is the favorite, blue mist flower. And I'm surprised. Oh, I think there might be a butterfly in there somewhere, but there's so many pictures that people will have of this with it just covered in butterflies. It's a wonderful, wonderful plant. And that will spread, it spreads eagerly. You can keep it in bounds though, it's no problem. I think in the beginning, maybe 15, 20 years ago, I might have put it in a front garden and I regretted that and took it out, but hey, I don't care anymore. If it's there and somebody likes it like a nice little butterfly, it's gonna stay. Greg's mist flower. Yes, yes. There are several. Yes, there are. Yes. This one does pretty good in the shade. Yeah, I have it in a semi-shady spot at school, and this is my home garden. No, this is school garden. Sorry. Yes, it gets very tall if it's in the shades. Oh, yeah, they do fine.
You know, leaf
Sure.
shapes are
It's
different.
different, yes, this
I
is
have
also
those.
called,
Flowers.
and next. Think of Turk's cap, yeah, I can't forget Turk's cap in the summertime and this at this time of year. And I've seen some hummingbirds recently around this. So it's a very good plant. And next. This is my aster. It's lovely. It's honestly, this came to me via a master gardener probably 20 years ago. Brought me some, and it was a roadside aster. And I cut it back, it comes back, and I can control it. I pull it out where I don't want it, but it makes such a beautiful display in the fall that I like to keep it there. As I say, small garden, and it's not neat. You come to my house and it's not neat. It's a little bit of everything, and that's why I do the school gardens, because then I have more space to spread out and try different things. And the next slide. These are two that I added to the program because they are abundant. They will spread, but I won't be without them. And that's frostweed. And you can see the pollinators there on the frostweed. And this is another one where I kind of interplant it with the asters, and I pull what I don't want and keep what I do. This year, I think the frostweed is going to monopolize, and the asters are going to be the secondary. Last year, as you saw, the asters were pretty front and center. And then the other one, golly, Maximilian sunflower is a wonderful plant. It doesn't belong in a small garden like mine, but it's there. And I find myself in March, April, whenever I start to see it coming through, just pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling till I leave a nice little circle of it, and I wait to see where it goes. But yes, oh yes, it just, boy, big time. But it grows up to the eaves and flowers. It will be flowering soon. And as far as the pollinator, you know, they just love it.
So what is your cluster?
Probably, oh, I actually had some bloom early this year. It had a couple of blooms on it, but for the majority, I don't think it'll be for another few weeks. Really? Wow.
And the ones
And I always cut mine back, and it got so tall. Yeah, and it's branching out. Yeah, yes, that's the way mine has gotten to. Next slide. And I think this is the end. And this was me saying to my friends in the garden club that this is the way we should be. And I have a quote. This was on the trifold, as were most of the other pictures. I have a quote here from Doug Tallamy that I just like to read because I think it's a great little, it makes me feel good about my garden. Gardening is like cooking. It is tempting to cook only with the goal of achieving great taste, with no thought of healthy eating, but that often results in tasty concoctions so full of fat, sugar, and salt that they are deadly in the long run. Similarly, it is tempting to garden only for beauty, without regard to the many ecological roles our landscapes must perform. All too often, such narrow gardening goals result in a landscape so low in ecological function that it drains the vitality from the surrounding ecosystems. And that's Doug Tallamy in Nature's Best Hope. But that's, I think we're becoming aware. I really do. I think we're spreading the word, and I think it's gonna fit. So thank you very much. It was enjoyable.
All right, thank you, Nancy.
Mhm.
If you ever get a chance to go and see the school that she's at, I used to work right close to it. I used to go over there after work and walk through the beautiful garden. I highly recommend a little tour if you're there.
All right, next, Bill is up. Are you there, Bill?
I am, Tim. I'm ready to go. Thank you.
All right, let me learn from my mistakes and share your presentation and put it into slideshow, and you're ready to go.
That's great. We've got full screen slide there. Thank you. Well, first, what I'd like to do is just express my gratitude to David Bezanson. Most of you probably did not know him. Some of you do, but he's with the Texas branch of the Nature Conservancy. Just this last year, they moved their headquarters from Austin to San Antonio, and he resides there now. The history of the Smiley Woodfin Meadow involves a family ranch that was founded back in 1835 by one of my great-great-grandfathers, Harvey Smiley, who came here from Kentucky. Under my great-grandfather, George Washington Smiley, and my great-uncle, Max Smiley, it was once as large as 20,000 acres in Lamar County, which is on the west side of Paris, Texas, about 80 miles northeast of McKinney. Sometime in the late 1800s, my great uncle Max Smiley purchased approximately 2,100 acres that were native prairie. And sadly, that became the largest single segment of the Blackland Prairie. Unfortunately, 4 years ago, my family, in spite of my efforts to put it in a conservancy trust, sold the entire ranch, including the Smiley Woodfin Meadow. And it appeared that as of 2 years ago, that all of this was going to be put into a solar farm. But thanks to the incessant work that David Bezanson has done over the last 2 years, 900 of the acres will be preserved without any solar panels going on them. What happened is that the individual who bought the property from my family either sold or leased much of the property to the Danish renewable energy company Ørsted. Some of you may be acquainted with Ørsted. It's the largest, probably the largest non-renewable energy company in the world. Certainly, it's the largest when it comes to offshore wind farms. And they're becoming a larger and larger presence throughout the world, including Taiwan and China, with onshore wind farms, solar farms, and battery production and installment. With these 900 acres having been purchased and sold, now it was closed just last month, to the Nature Conservancy, Brandon Belcher, who currently manages Clymer Meadow, will take over the management, and it couldn't be in better hands. I have just a couple of slides that David took last spring when he was there. And there's a very diverse floral composition there. A lot of it owes to the surface topographical features, the Mima Mounds and the Gilgai which produce numerous micro environments. But this is a nice picture showing the Baptisia that is more common to the east of us. Here in Collin County, we see mainly the false blue indigo, the Baptisia australis. But you go just about 20 or 30 miles east of here, and this Baptisia sphaerocarpa, the yellow Baptisia, takes over. This shot shows it in conjunction with Indian paintbrush, the Castelli indivisa, the Texas brush. Could we have the next slide, Tim? And here's just a wider angle photo of much of what we just saw. I think there's one more slide, maybe, or is this it? Yeah. Okay. And I should have asked David what this is. I don't know if it's possibly shooting star. It may be shooting star here in the foreground. But I'd have to inquire. Carol, what does that look like to you? Hard to say. But what we hope to do, as Rodney said at the start of the pink grass orchids. Wow, that is neat. Okay, that's something I have not seen. As Rodney said at the start of the program, we plan to get with Brandon Belcher, and we'll ask him to lead a field trip. It's an interesting place to see both in the fall and the spring. I don't know what plans the Nature Conservancy has to hay the property. For the previous 140 years or so, it would be hayed every July. And even though my cousin, who ran the ranch for approximately 25 years preceding the sale, would cut it right down to 1 or 2 inches above the ground. The grasses always came back beautifully. So I'm going to communicate with Brandon here probably tomorrow, and we'll have something set up soon, I hope. Thank you, Tim.
All right. Thank you, Bill.
Bill, that is a Silvis dropseed prairie, correct?
I'm sorry, Rodney, I couldn't hear you.
That's a Silvis dropseed prairie.
Yes, right. It's a Sylvata. It's a Silvis dropseed prairie. It's a transitional area. It's where the Blackland Prairie, the post oak savanna, and the piney woods intermix. Most of the soil is sandy, but there's a mix with the black alpha soils. It's really interesting. This is on the north side of Highway 82, which runs from Gainesville over to Texarkana. And on the north side is mainly this sandy transitional soil, and on the black side is all black, probably alpha soil. And when the ranch was in full operation, they cultivated about 800 acres of crops on the south side of the highway, and everything on the north side was pasture or just 2,100 acre native meadow. So it's real interesting because it's the far range of a number of plants that are more at home in each of those ecoregions.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Let's keep moving on here. We have a lot to go through.
That's the largest Silvis dropseed prairie left in the world. Even at 900 acres, so it tells you how rare that is.
All right. Gene is up next. Here you go, Gene.
Yeah, we moved to McKinney in 2017 from the Gulf Coast, from the Galveston mainland area. when I retired, and it was primarily to escape Harvey. And our granddaughters are up here. So you can go to the next slide.
John, Ida.
Okay, we are in, this is our backyard when we first moved in. And actually, that tree is one of the reasons why we picked this house. Because originally, I'm from Wisconsin, but we spent 40 years and 35 years in Lisle, Illinois. And that area has a lot of bur oaks and oak savannas, and that's a bur oak. And after having live oaks down in the Galveston area, I didn't want any more live oaks. So this is what we had when we moved in. So if you go on to the next slide. But actually, this is what I wanted. And this is what I was thinking. And that is my favorite bur oak at the Prairie, at the Morton Arboretum in Lisle, Illinois. And that's where we used to live. And they burn that prairie every year, and it's pretty grass forward. And I kind of prefer the grass look myself, you know, rather than all the forbs and everything. And what we had noticed, that oak tree, this was originally a cornfield, and it's 100 acres, and that oak tree was in the middle of the field. So if you go out there and you look under the oak tree, the grasses are all very short. And so that's what we were going to try to shoot for underneath that bur oak we had in the backyard. So if you go on to the next slide. Now, this is a red oak, and this red oak is in the front of our subdivision. And that's 380 right there. And it probably only has a couple more years before they take it down. But if you look under that tree, there are a lot of little blue stem and cytoidsgramma and other grasses. And so when we first moved in, I didn't know where I was going to get native plants. And so my wife and I went out there and we dug up, you know, outside the drip line, we dug up a lot of the little blue stem. And you go on to the next. And now this is a few years later, but we had planted all this little blue stem underneath that bur oak. And, you know, bur oaks don't seem to like to grow alone. And so I had planted an acorn from the bur oak, you know, off to the left. And you see the little iron ornament there. That's about 3 feet tall there right now at the beginning of 2023. So if you go on to the next slide. Now this is, I just took this picture, and you can see, you know, a lot of that's actually little blue stem underneath that bur oak, but it's been staying short. And I think it's because of the root competition with the bur oak. But that little bur oak that was 3 feet a year and a half ago is 12 feet right now. I'm just amazed how fast they grow. But if you go on to the next slide. Now, we didn't feel the native area was big enough. And I wanted to grow bluebonnets. And so what I did was I got decomposed granite and compost, and I blended it up 50-50. And I extended the bed out about 18 inches to 2 feet from what the existing plantings are. So if you go on to the next slide. Now, this is what it looks like right now. And what I kind of discovered is that, you know, I'm having a lot better luck with seeds. Okay, particularly in this area where I have the decomposed granite. And so I had planted some seeds for Mexican hat that I had harvested. And that whole area is pretty much that. And it's also seeding in with the tuberosa. So if you go on to the next slide. Now, this is why I wanted, I wanted to put in a better drained area. And I got about 1/4 of a pound of seeds from Whale Seed Farm and planted them all around the edges. And I also got some Indian paintbrush seed. You can see some in the back that have come in. And I was sort of surprised that that actually bloomed, from planting it last fall, and then in the spring, it bloomed, and it does seem to, it's hemiparasitic. And so I think what I was seeing is that right at the edge where the lawn is where that grew. So if you go on to the next slide. Now this is looking up the other direction. So you can see, that I have a fair bit of area where I have the little blue stem. The other plants that I've actually put in there, I do like the autumn sage, and so I have a lot, several different varieties of that in there. And there's also a Turk's cap that's now about as big as a Volkswagen, and I mean, it's great. I don't think there's ever not a humming on that plant ever. And what I've been trying to do is I had planted some along the side of the house, kind of as an indicator to draw in the hummingbirds. So they kind of come zipping around the corner. And because I have the other plants there that I do bring in dragonflies, and they do seem to not get along quite as well with the hummingbirds. And what I've noticed with both the hummingbirds and the dragonflies is they like to perch on things. So I've got some amylanchers that I had cut back, and I pushed them in the, in the beds. So now there are, thin stems that both the dragonflies and the hummingbirds can perch on. So if you go on to this is my last slide. And what I did was I harvested, I let the bluebonnets go to seed, and then I harvest some. So I've got about 1 pound that I harvested, but I also have ones that have sprouted already, and they're fairly big. And I don't know if those are going to be the ones to go through, the winter. But so they're still, if they're alive now, my suspicion is they'll go, right? So, and then also in the common area, they've been mowing everything, and we have Indian paintbrush there too. And so before they got in there to mow, I got about 100 grams of Indian paintbrush seed. So, I'll be planting those back in that area to try to propagate that more. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show, what you can do in a small area, because my backyard is 60 by 25. My wife tells me now I can't get rid of any more of the lawn because the grandchildren can't run back and forth. So I'm just going to have to make do with what I have. But so that's
all right. Thanks, Gene. All right. So next we have up Melanie. Melanie, are you there?
Yeah,
All
can you hear
right.
me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, take it away.
It's going to be pretty short. I just wanted to share something that was going on in Prosper, Texas, for those that live a little further north like me. There's a big park they're putting in. It's at First and Coit Road. And you can see from the picture, it's like baseball fields and all these other things. And so a group of us had gone out there when we heard this was happening to dig up plants to transfer to other prairies. And we did some of that, and through I think it's some people in Master Naturalists, they weren't all Master Naturalists, they were able to get the city of Prosper to dedicate a portion of this park that has a lot of wildflowers to stay native. So this is just started, right now it's a bunch of dirt moving, and I was just going to share a little bit about what's out there and, in the hopes of being able to share more of it as this thing progresses. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is kind of where it is. There's a girl named Laura, I don't know, I'll say her name wrong, Kiyoyama, that does this with me. You guys may know her, but also involved is the city of Prosper. We've got Sam Kijde from Texas Parks and Wildlife. And really the goal is to kind of save a portion of this. It may not be as big as what's drawn here. This happens to be an iNaturalist project that's out there. So some of us have already taken some pictures of the plants. And I don't have a lot yet because when we first went out there, it was like end of May. And so a lot of things had already bloomed and we were digging and, so forth. So kind of around July, they decided they weren't going to destroy the park. They were going to put a retaining ditch in there, and then they've got them to move it. So we kind of have this little section that I think is going to be very nice in the spring. And so I just want to share a little bit about what's on it. Go to the next slide. So the soil, and this isn't a picture of the soil, by the way. I'm learning from trying to learn soil. There's not a lot of pictures out there, but it's rocky. It's very sloped. It's shallow. It is on the edges of a creek. So there's a creek and a small pond that run through it. And I used that soil web tool that said it was Austin series, which said it was 85%, whatever that is. Of course, I did my own yard here today. It also says it's 85% that, but mine's not Austin series, mine's something else. So I'm going to have to learn more about the soil, but I'd say it's more of like a rocky, slopey, shallowy, kind of thing, kind of soil, with the white rock underneath. All right, next slide. All right, so here's some of the flowers that we took, and then I'll show you the list of them. But, some of the things like the yellow flax, the ratani, these are things that I don't see a lot when I just go look at, various prairies out there. Somebody found a heliotrope. I don't even know if that's native or not. I haven't done a lot of research, but I've never really seen one of those. It had some larkspur on it. I will say that we dug a lot of the larkspur up, so I hope they come back because that was before we knew we would keep it. It's covered with liatris. It has that false pennyroyal, a lot of baptisia. So there's a lot of really nice plants out there. If you go to the next slide, this is just kind of showing you what's there. I didn't do all the pictures, but the invasives that we're going to have to hit, kind of the ones we're seeing most right now is the KR blue stem. There's scabiosa out there that we're working on. I won't say it's not the whole prairie, which is probably like, I don't know if it's like 10 acres. I don't really know how big it is, but it's not the whole thing scabiosa. So right now we're trying to do, just get rid of the seed heads and pull some of the rosettes for next year. There's a little Johnson grass in it, mainly to where I think they do they cut through the paths or the trucks drive through, and there's some musk thistle, but it's not a whole lot. So I'm sure there's a lot more invasives out there than I've listed, but with everything so dormant right now, it's kind of really hard to tell what's out there. As far as the native grasses, prairie dropsy is probably the biggest one I see out there. There's some purple therion in the real rocky areas, Texas grama, silver blue stem, Texas wintergrass. I'm hoping that we find some, little blue stem or something out there, but I haven't seen any yet. But we're, maybe after it rains, we'll go out there and maybe we'll find some. A few shrubby things out there, and then I listed all the flowers that we had when I was out there, like in May and then in July, taking pictures of and posted on iNaturals project. So there's a lot of different types out there. One of them I put on there was wild carrot. I'm having a kind of a discussion with someone, was that really Queen's Anne lace? And it might have been. I think the way you tell the difference is that Queen Anne's lace is, it's a big white umbel with a purple dot in the middle. And so when I saw it in bloom, oh, this looks smaller to me. It wasn't fully in bloom yet. And I didn't go back till July and it was already done. So I'm hoping it's wild carrot. If not, it will move to the invasive list. But you know, a lot of different flowers out there, like the breadroot. You know, I don't normally I see those mainly on rocky prairies, and it had some meadow flax out there, you know, and a lot of nice little things. So what I'm hoping to do is as we go back and see this evolve, you know, I'll take some better pictures of it, and maybe we can see kind of how we can restore prairies in our areas, or at least maintain them. I know they're planning on putting a trail through it. They've already told us they got to fix the dam on the bridge. So, you know, we know that's going to introduce invasives, but we're just going to kind of see what happens on this. Next slide. Okay, so if anybody's interested, wants to come out and do a work day or something, here's kind of the next information we have. You can send me an email or call me, and it's on the September 8th and the 14th. You can also collect seeds, you know, when they're ready. Obviously, we don't collect all the seeds, but you know, we do some of that as well. But that's when we'll be out there. Or if you just want to come out and look at it, that's when we're going to be out there. I'd say don't show up right when we start working, but if you show up like an hour into the process or hour and a half, we usually walk around and try to look at all the plants that are out there. So it looks like we got some rain the past few days, so maybe the liatris will be blooming. I don't know how long after rain it takes, but I know it's got a lot of that out there. Anyway, that's what I had.
All right.
That's
Thank you,
it.
Melanie. Appreciate that. So next up is Rachel. And
Hello.
Rachel, are you there?
Yes, I'm
San
greeting you
Antonio.
from urban San Antonio, and I want to tell y'all that it is urban. I'm between Salado Creek and the San Antonio River, up the hill from the site that was the second and third missions built by the Spanish Franciscans. And that road you see in front of my house was a streetcar route that was took up the rest of the right of way and became a 4-lane road so people could start driving cars in 1930. So I have the urban challenges. Another major challenge I have is that for the last 2 years, at least, since San Antonio Water System has given us these new meters, which actually give us a readout of the temperature of the water coming in off the water main into the lines coming into our yards, which I like because I kept saying our water is too hot. In August and September, the temperature of that water coming into the line in my yard has been between 89 and 92 degrees. So I am constantly aware in the summer that this water that's been traveling under this 4-lane road to get to my house, if I put it on my yard, is going to actually make my yard hotter. So there's, you know, and the other challenge I have is that this lot is 9 times as deep as it is wide. It is a very narrow lot, as are most of these. They were platted in 1900. And for many years, I thought it was a lot of challenge. And now I really see a lot of opportunities. I have a Monarch Way station in the front yard between the house and the detached garage, which is downhill. I have my own edible garden. And then beyond that is the wildscape. And I have a chain of 3 rain gardens. And because I have the steepest drop in elevation in our neighborhood, I actually ended up with the yard that is the longest. So, so I wanted to say, thank you for having me again. In 2022, I just sent Tim some photos, and he actually put them together about plants that I noticed that the mockingbirds like. So I plant them in my front yard to get to make sure I have mockingbirds nesting in my yard. And I wanted to point out, you see the Carolina snail seed, the Granjeno, Anaqua, the native Acerola cherry, American beautyberry, and the American nightshade. Okay, so please take note of those names. And in 2023, I sent Tim a PDF. I made it up to PDF. I didn't just send him the photos, but then I didn't get logged in correctly. So I hope he was able to interpret that. But I only mentioned the one plant, the Morris rhubarb, which I also have in my yard on the downhill side now, 4 of them actually now. And so then I hope this year I actually made it up to the PowerPoint, but I was so worried that if I started putting the text boxes in with the plant names, I wouldn't get to all of them. And I have to admit, you all know the plants, and I know you know the plants, so it's easy to be lazy. So if you allow me to come back in 2025, then I will put the text boxes in. That will be my plan for next year. But did you notice on this, I wanted to tell you this year, actually from 2002 to 2024, we have had a spike in temperatures, as in 2022. Those temperatures in San Antonio were hot, that the heat index was, for about a week, was hovering around 105 degrees. And so all of a sudden, some of the non-native plants just quit. There was a lot of talk about this, a lot of people noticing. And then this year we had actually a hotter June than July. And last summer it was just persistently hot. And so in this, I've noticed that there are several plants. Now, of course, some of these others, I'm not familiar with enough to tell you, but in my yard, I've observed that these plants actually get to fruit abundantly, and when the temperature goes up, they will actually accelerate their fruiting. And so the granjeno, and the American beautyberry, you notice from the mockingbirds that also that the Cordia boissieri, which many people know as Texas olive or Mexican olive, and the Texas persimmon Diospyros texana, that some of those same plants that the mockingbirds like are the ones that have really set so much fruit here during those times when the temperature has gone up. And my beautyberries are all actually going on a second set of fruit this year. So I just wanted to share that. That's amazing. And I thank you for catching that because yes, it was almost rubra, is slippery elm. And so I just want to get a shout out to one of our natives, which you're all very familiar with, Malvaviscus arboreus, a variety Drummondii, because you all know that it is that everyone says, oh, this is a plant that's 100% edible. And but we don't always explore that. And a lot of people kind of look at that and say, oh, that looks hairy. Well, I was in my garden when it got really hot in June, and I thought, okay, I ran out of all my water. Am I going to go way uphill and then come back? Or what am I going to do? And I said, well, I am surrounded by this plant. Why don't I just eat some mallow leaves? I never tried it. And it wasn't, the hairs are not such a big deal. And when I really started thinking about it, because we tend to find reasons not to try native plants, really the hairs on the Texas mallow, when you eat them, are not even as textured as broccoli. So if you haven't tried them, I really encourage you to get out there with your Texas mallow, add it to your salads. And then the last thing after that I wanted to give a shout out to is that if you hear the word manzanita, a lot of times people think that is in reference to a fruit that sounds like or tastes like an apple. But what I find here, at least, is there are at least 20 fruits of native fruits that we have that people will refer to as la manzanita. And basically all they're saying is, hey, that's a little red fruit, and I know it's edible. So you see like agarita, here we have the native acerola cherry, Malpighia glabra, the mallow again, and you can think of others. There's probably at least 20 of them, but that's something that if you hear that term, it's not really a specific plant, but it took me a while to find that. So I thought I'd share that little tidbit because that is something I've definitely learned in San Antonio. And so I just want to say thank you so much for this amazing that you share the meetings. I learn so much all the time. And from all of us in San Antonio to all of you, happy trails to you.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate that. We can't leave out your dogs here. Nice pictures of them.
That's my
And last we have,
buddies for sure.
pardon?
My garden buddies for sure. If they see me
All right.
digging and really trying to get something finished, then they always come over and try to help.
Absolutely. All right, thank you again. So next we have Tina up. Tina will be our last presenter. Actually, I guess it's going to be a tag team. All right.
Hello, I'm Ed, and this is my mother, Tina. And we kind of misunderstood the assignment because we heard everyone bring slideshows about your favorite plants. We thought they meant one plant per person rather than. Yeah, so I'm glad we chose the plant we did because it's one that I have not seen mentioned this entire night. This is Lindheimer's senna, also known as velvet leaf senna. We actually got our first one at the Discovery Gardens native plant sale. And this little plant is the larval host plant for cloudless sulfurs and various other sulfur butterflies. But most interestingly is that it's also a fall, even late fall blooming. Like we will see them blooming in November even when the monarchs come through. It's one of the few, along with frostweeds, one of the few nectar plants that's still in full flush, full of nectar, so the monarchs can stop over and take a drink before they keep heading south. So because we had a small pollinator garden, or at the time when we first started working on our garden, our goal was to have a small pollinator garden. And this was actually one of the plants that I researched and found on wildflower.org along with my brother. And we were looking for over a year before my mother and father finally were able to get into the native plant sale at the Discovery Gardens and made a beeline for it. Pun intended. Got the last one. The plant itself has this beautiful foliage and it's so soft. It really is deserving of the name velvet leaf. But it's got like this bluish tinge to it. The cloudless sulfurs, their larvae are this sort of like pale green and like more closely matching the underside. So you have to look really close because they are extremely small. But the flowers, when they show up, they're this bright, vibrant yellow, which makes the leaves even more blue. You could go to the next slide. So there it is up against our fence line. And you can see the hairs pretty well on the image that we have that's on the left. It sort of repels the water a bit because it's got these tiny soft hairs. Usually when you hear of a hairy plant, I tend to assume it's going to be a little prickly, but it's honestly softer than lamb's ear. It is a wonderful little plant and good for pollinators as well as just the butterflies themselves. So we have tons of beautiful yellow butterflies flittering around outside of our fence. Yeah. So
They receive very well.
they do, and it's great. We actually have this outside in our pollinator bed, which is a circle. But then we have it outside the fence along the alley, just between the alley and the fence. And we have a lot of it. And it reseeds itself just fine, but it won't like crowd out anything else because it's on these long stalks. So there's other plants can grow up around with it. And
and back this year. Here, I'll talk to your chest. So I cut him back this year, so because it would get so unruly, you'd get a long stalk and then it would fall in the walkway and stuff. And so in our pollinator garden, I cut him back. And that one is not quite yet blooming, but it's going to bloom soon. So
it's a neat little plant, and if you want some seeds, you can reach out to us.
My strategy, that's fine with that I have to do a lot of pulling. So a couple years I went out. Think about
that's what I do. I harvest them.
Yeah.
She's saying that she harvests them. She likes to put little jewelry bags over the seed pods like she does for her milkweed, and that's how she collects them because she actually pays attention to them, unlike me. And she goes out with little bags. You can get like 100 of them for cheap on Amazon, and you put them over the little pods of whatever you want to collect that has pods. And when they pop open, you'll have all the fresh seed without having to like cut them off or anything. They'll just open up by themselves.
Same thing with inland sea oats.
Yes, also great for controlling your inland sea oats, and for, well, not Greg's mist flower, you need to be pretty proactive about, but I mean, yeah.
And then there's a question about, do you use it for making tea?
No, we do not, but we can.
But it's a,
It's a,
yeah, that's right.
yeah, it's a laxative, which is why we kind of laughed a bit. So if you do decide to make tea with it, do so with caution, unless you are wanting it for that purpose.
How tall is that? How tall does that get?
Go back to the previous page.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't include the pictures. It's, yeah, it can get a little taller than me, but not.
But then it
So,
falls.
yeah, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so that's fallen over. Just
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm kind of looking down at
Oh,
Yeah, it's usually very like erect until it gets to a certain point where it just like topples over because it's so straight up and down usually. But yeah, yeah, a lot like that.
it halfway down. And call it my top.
But honestly, I like what they grow on the stalk so much because you can plant so many other things alongside it. Like you could plant like cosmos or sunflowers or whatever, and it'll be very neighborly to them. It won't infringe. And because it's a legume, it's gonna it's gonna fix the soil and it's gonna be better for whatever's growing near it. So it's actually a really great plant to have. Just yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ed and Tina, and thank you to all the presenters. Really appreciate everybody attending. So thanks again. There's Rodney, final thoughts.
Well, I appreciate everybody who presented tonight and everybody online who joined us and had comments and questions. And we hope to see you here in October, learn about parasitic wasps. Thank you. Thanks for coming.